Good. Welcome everyone to actually the last webinar of our training day series, which had the goal of presenting the blueprints of the European Affordable Housing Consortium project. So the topic of the day is how to overcome regulatory barriers for district level social and affordable housing renovations. That's just the rules before we start the webinar. As mentioned at the beginning, the webinar is being recorded and the replay will be shared on ShapeU YouTube channel. So we ask you to remain mute during the presentations and the panel discussions. And during this moment, please use the chat for communication. And there will be a specific Q&A moment when I will stop the recording. So you will be free to turn on your camera and also turn on your microphone. But the first part with the presentation and the panel discussion is going to be recorded. That's the agenda of the day. I will start with the presentation of ShapeU, even though I'm pretty sure that all of you know the project uh, by this moment, because I see that you're regulars, I would say, in the ShapeU events. Then Thibaut Perraillon and Nicolas Mansart from Greenflex are going to present the regulatory barriers that were found in the different blueprints of the project. Then I would ask a few questions to the blueprint authors. So Paula Ferrando Julia from GNE Finance, Henk Visser from TU Delft, and Nerea Gomez from ECTP. And then finally, we will have a good practice example from Denmark, the Aalborg model, presented to us by Sven Bohr. And then finally, the Q&A moment. Oof, what happened? You still see the presentation, right? Good, okay, sorry. It's because my screen changed for me. So the Q&A moment, and then just like for the 2 last minutes, I will let you know what's happening next in ShapeU. But first, what is ShapeU? ShapeU is the European Affordable Housing Consortium. It's composed of 10 dedicated partners, and the consortium is led by Housing Europe, the Federation of Social Housing Organization. It's co-funded by the European Union Single Market Program. So its objective is to ensure that the renovation wave and the new European Bauhaus have a social and inclusion dimension, and focus also on the renovation of social and affordable housing. And more concretely speaking, its goal is to support affordable and social housing providers, local authorities, and SMEs to renovate social and affordable housing at district level. And how can we do that? We provide different kind of support. One, it's a one-stop shop for all this target group that I mentioned. That's what ShapeU aims to be through all this activity. So you're going to hear about the guidelines that are being created and should be delivered by the end of the year. So this guideline, there are three of them. We call them blueprints, and they are focused on three topics, three aspects of the social and affordable housing renovation. there is also a peer-to-peer mentorship program, which unfortunately I don't think you can join anymore because the project is actually coming to its end by February next year. But this peer-to-peer mentorship program provided tailor-suited help support to the organization that were involved in the renovation at district level of social and affordable housing through online support, but also in-person support during the different events of the project. So we provided a series of online and also real live events. So this webinar here is actually the last online event. And there is one final in-person event that I will mention at the end of the webinar. And to finish, the project will also provide policy recommendations based on all the feedback received by the different actors met during the project. Do we have any news from Thibaut?
Yes, Thibaut is with me in the room actually.
That's good. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
So I will leave the floor to Thibaut and Nicolas from Greenflex, who will present the regulatory barriers met while writing the blueprints. So I'll keep sharing my screen, but you can let me know when I change the slide.
Thank you, Benedict. So, as Benedict said, there are three modules in the blueprints that have been written recently. One is the technical aspects of affordable and social housing renovations. The second one is on implementation of projects. And the third one is on social innovation. Today, we will present the regulatory framework in the scope of the implementation of the projects. And if we can go to the next slide. We will start with a quick introduction on how to renovate districts in the context of a multi-layered regulatory framework. And then we will focus on the regulations to consider at building level and then at district level. And before finishing, we will focus a little bit more on topics related to public and private procurement and also the regulations to involve tenants in financing the renovation. So if we can go on the next slide. As I said, a quick introduction to better understand the regulatory framework. To start with, but you all probably all already know that there are different types of social and affordable housing organization throughout Europe. So you can find models of public ownership and public management, to the model of public ownership and private management under a service contract. But there are also private organizations that are generally non-profit that own and manage affordable housing for certain vulnerable groups. Sorry. And you can also find housing cooperatives that may have the land either on a leasehold or ownership basis, where the residents are not owners of the property but have the right to use it for a period of time, and that is usually long term. So that's the context of the different types of social and affordable housing organizations. And related to that, there is a multi-layered regulatory framework. First of all, there are European regulations that give recommendations and rules for the regulatory frameworks, and then these regulations are translated into laws in each country. So that's the national regulations. And then in each country, you also have local regulations that can go from regional regulations to state regulations in federal countries. And also, you can find regulations specific to metropolises, for example, the Greater Paris area, and very specific local municipality or intermunicipality level. So we will see that this multi-level regulatory framework can be a source of barriers for district renovations, and we will try to see how it works just after. So maybe to start with, on the next slide, we will try to focus on regulations to consider at building level. So what are the key questions that the housing organizations and the project promoters should ask themselves, and what is the process that they should follow to renovate district? So first of all, what is the decision-making process? When you renovate a building, there are rules to follow and process to follow when choosing the works and the level of renovation to be carried out. And depending on the level of the renovation, you will have to involve the tenants in the decision making. So that's a regulation topic to consider, and maybe to tease a little bit the other blueprints. It's a very specific topic that you will be able to find in the social innovation blueprint. There are also the topic of urban planning policy around the building. So what are the authorization needed to renovate the building regarding the district, for example, heritage protection or flora and fauna protection. In the Netherlands, for instance, there is a very strict flora and fauna regulation to be considered before starting a project, a renovation project. In some other countries, for instance, France, for example, heritage protection can also be a regulatory barriers for district and actually building renovation. So those are regulations to take into consideration when launching a project. There are also regulations regarding the building itself. Even though in most European countries you won't need a work permit to perform the renovation, you will at least need a declaration of the work approved by the municipality uh, that will verify that the work comply with the regulations. For example, regulations for safety, disabled people accessibility, health, fire issues, energy efficiency, etc. Um, and then another question to ask is which procurement is the most suitable for the project. So we will see after in the presentation um, that regarding depending on the housing organization type, you will need to follow public or private procurement systems, but it is possible to include sustainability and social criterions in the procurement. So we will see after how to do it. Um, and then, is there a possibility to increase the rents and or to recover charges? And it will be a specific part in our presentation also just after. So that's for building level. If we go on to the next slide, we will see that there are also regulations to consider at district level. So probably a housing organization is used to renovating its own buildings, but sometimes the renovation of the buildings is included in a more in a wider project, which is the district renovation. Uh, and even though the competency of planning a district level renovation is up to local authorities, um, there are criterions to follow in order to be able to perform the renovation of the building in the context of a district level. So, what is the urban planning legal framework consisting of? First question to ask is what are the permitted developments? Um, is it possible to add buildings on the urban land? Is it possible to add floors, for example? And it is linked to the development standards defined by the district renovation project that is usually defining a large scope of criteria such as population density, public services required, transportation, etc. That will have an influence on how you plan your project at the building level. Um, there are also planning obligations, such as the share of social and affordable housing in the project. And also, the question to ask before starting the project is who's in charge of the new developments, public infrastructure. For example, if you add buildings or if you renovate buildings and have more tenants afterwards, who is in charge of adding public services to the district in order to make it livable. And finally, last but not least, what are the building and renovation standards? Is the municipality aiming to reach a certain performance, for example, for all the buildings in the development and in the district? So that's for the regulations to consider at district levels. Of course, the regulations will vary from a country to another, from a district to another. So there's a need afterwards to really understand the local regulations in order to succeed in the project. If we go on to the next slide, um, we wanted to make a focus on procurement process. Um, there are two types of procurement, public or private. Here on this slide, we focus on public procurement. The regulatory framework for public procurement follows a set of European directives. So there's a common scope for everyone in Europe, but each country can have its own specificities in how these directives are defined into laws. So each project should follow its country's framework. We wanted to give you the the national and the local rules concerning the public procurement. So here are the main aspects to consider when launching a public procurement. First of all is advertising requirements. Um, Usually, contracts must be advertised in an open and transparent manner via what we call a call for competition to ensure equal access to contract opportunities across the European Union. Um, there's also a need to specify the technical needs to give equal access to all candidates. Um, there's also the selection and tender stage that needs to be defined. Um, the directives and therefore the national laws give a list of information that the contracting authority can require from the candidates, and also the instructions that the contracting authority should give to them and describe the process, for example, of scoring of different offers from the tenderers. And finally, noticing and standstill. The contracting entity has to notice unsuccessful candidates and also wait a minimum period that we call standstill before contractualizing with the chosen company. And the bullet point that I haven't told about yet is the contract award procedures. There are a lot of procedures for public procurement, but some of them can enable a district renovation to be more sustainable and more socially adapted in the new urban Bauhaus and the renovation wave. Um, for example, innovation partnership and design contests that are procedures that can help the contracting authority to obtain an idea for a concept, or also to purchase a good or a service that is not available yet on the market. And two other types of procurement that are a bit more adapted to sustainable and social goals, that are green public procurement and social responsible public procurement. So, for example, the green public procurement is a strategic approach to public procurement that adds environmental consideration into the purchasing process. And in the socially responsible public procurement, um, it it integrates in the same way social considerations into the procurement process. So, for example, it will focus on benefit to communities, workers, and society afterwards. Um, Nevertheless, the public procurement is a very constrained process. So there are a lot of legal challenges and risks, and it also requires times and resources for the contracting authority. And these issues often lead to avoiding procedures uh, that are usually better for quality outcomes. For example, the green public procurement and the socially responsible public procurement. Social housing organizations tend to uh, go to the easiest path, as it's already very difficult. So that's why a good practice would be to systematize introducing social and environmental considerations into the public procurement process, and then to replicate and scale it up, um, so that it's taking time and resources first, but then when the best public procurement process is found, it can be replicated. Most of housing organizations that are public and public funded must follow the public procurement process. But there are also other types of procurements that are private, and that's on the next slide. As private owners are not required to follow public procurement rules. Um, but as I said, if their renovation project is funded by the EU or by public authorities, they might have to follow some or all rules of public procurement, and it varies depending on the country. Um, so, regarding the private procurement process, it aims to optimize cost, quality, and efficiency, of course. But in the scope of a private, sustainable, and social procurement for district renovation, it can involve also a strategic approach to sourcing and acquiring goods, and include specifications on aspects such as energy efficiency and green materials to prioritize sourcing energy efficiency building materials, but also bio-based or geo-based materials, also reuse materials, and that goes with waste management and recycling. There are some strict laws about waste management and recycling on building sites in across Europe, but it's possible to go further by adding specifications into the private procurement, and also low carbon footprint criterions, for example, to reduce the overall carbon footprint of the renovation by choose locally sourced materials, for example, to reduce transportation emissions, and also how to engage local businesses and SMEs and startups to promote economic growth within the community. Um, so that's all for private procurement. If we go to the next slide, we will focus on the last topic that we wanted to focus on this morning, is how to involve tenants in financing the renovation, because of course the deeper the renovation is, the more expensive it can be. So there are regulations in order to be able to involve tenants in financing the renovations. First mechanism would be rent raising. So the idea is to raise the rents after the renovation in order to recover a part of the financing. But there are regulations associated with rent raising. And generally, it's based on European rules, such as rent increases should only be possible after renovation and only if the standards of housing is increased and the energy costs reduced. Um, and also, in order to avoid unaffordable renovations and unaffordable rent increases, renovation should only be possible if a large majority of tenants agree to the plan and to the rent increase, of course. In most European countries, there are different methods to regulate social housing rents. Some have free rent setting. Others have rent capping and rent or rent control, imposing minimum and maximum rent. So the contracting authority has to be sure that the business plan of the renovation is taking those regulations into consideration. Another possibility is to recover maintenance and operation costs. Um, in case, so this mechanism exists in some countries where housing providers can recover the cost for some operation and maintenance activities, especially for common areas of apartment buildings, for instance. But in the case of a renovation, when you install new equipments, for example, a boiler, it can imply higher maintenance costs and therefore higher charges for the residents. So in these cases, national regulations might require a vote from the residents to agree on the renovation works. Another mechanism is recovering part of tenants' energy savings. Um, in some countries, when the landlord carries out energy efficiency renovation that enables the tenants to reduce their energy bill, they can recover part of the energy savings. For example, in France, social housing providers can recover 50% of the theoretical energy savings every year, but only for 15 years. Um, but however, of course, there's a need to agree on the works beforehand and voting on adding additional charges, and there's a need to be clear on the regulations in the project country. The last mechanism is selling energy to tenants. In the context of a renovation that includes local production of renewable energy, for example, photovoltaic panels. The owner of the energy source could choose to provide the energy to the resident by making them pay for the energy and thus um, recover part of the energy plant investment. Um, but there are a lot of regulations related to this cost recovery for energy selling to residents. Um, so there's a need to analyze in details the national, regional, or state laws, and also local ordinances to be sure that it is possible to to sell energy to tenants and what is the maximum amount of energy that can be sold every year, for example. And that's all for the implementation blueprint presentation. I think we will go deeper into details on the barriers that have been found in other blueprints in the roundtable.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. I don't know if Thibault also wanted to add something or.
No, it's more for question and answers. If there's any, we'll be happy to answer them. But Nicolas' presentation was pretty detailed about what we wanted to tell you guys.
Okay, thank you, Thibault. And then we will move forward to the panel discussion with the three blueprints authors. So we have Paula from GNE Finance, who worked on the project implementation blueprint. Henk from TU Delft, who worked on the social innovation blueprint. And Nerea from ECTP, who worked on the technical and technological innovation blueprint. And of course, Nicolas and Thibault, you're still with us. So you're also welcome to answer. I have 3 questions. I would like to know what is the main regulatory barrier for your respective focus or respective topic? And maybe I will start with Henk about the social innovation.
Okay,
So
yeah.
what is the
On the
main
social
regulatory
innovation,
barrier?
we focused, of course, on the position of the citizens, the people living in the buildings, and regulations they face. It was already in the presentation mentioned that there are strong regulations to, say, give the citizens a role in the decision making. Many projects, depending on the type of projects, of course, and the type of country, there are regulations that at least maybe 50% or 70% of the people have to agree, especially when there's a rent increase, with the proposals. And somehow this was a barrier. But on the other hand, you could also say, like, from the perspective of the citizens, it's also for their protection. Yeah. So now you see that there are movements to change these laws, to have fewer people being needed to vote in favor of a proposal. But then I would say, at the same time, you would also have to look like, what does it mean for the people that would not easily vote in favor of the project? Of course, there are different types of housing. In social housing, where there's one housing owner and the people are the tenants. That's quite different than what we saw in Eastern Europe, where most of the affordable housing is owner occupied, and then you have buildings with unions of condominiums. And there they also have to agree with all of them for investments. And in Eastern Europe, in Estonia, for instance, we saw these regulations that only 50% plus one have to vote for a renovation, and then it will happen. But that's very good for the progress of the energy renovation, of course. You reduce the barriers. At the same time, that would be needed to also have regulations to support the the homeowners that cannot afford such a change. So yeah, there's always a balance in making the barriers for the energy renovations lower, because there are a lot of regulatory barriers. And at the same time, we have to see, like, what would be the effect of all the people, especially when talking about affordable housing. It can have an impact on the total living cost, of course. Yeah, so maybe that's my first reaction.
Thank you, Henk. I will ask the same question to Paula. So what's the main regulatory barrier, according to you, for the project implementation?
Yeah, thanks, Benedict. I think Nicolas presented all that it's in the implementation blueprint. So I would say that, okay, the regulatory framework, it's in evolution. I mean, like, there are rules that we have to follow. There are some regulatory framework in all that levels that Nicolas presented to us. But all the times it's like that rules has to be moving, going forward and evolving to make it easier and to try to do it the things better. So I would say that there are one thing that Shapey also is doing, it is like the good practices. And there are good practices in many countries and in other regions that are doing many interesting things. And there are one question that the policymakers and also the technical profiles has to ask themselves is like how they could do it, and then what are the barriers in their own region, local or national level that are not that don't permit them to do that in that regions, and try to move all the time that barriers, because the one thing that I think we have to be clear is like the frameworks are not stable, are like we are understanding all that rules, and then we are like as all the social aspect, technical aspects, and also urban aspects are evolving, you have to have the option to move it, to change it. So the regulatory barriers are, I mean, like all that we cannot do, and we think it has to be done. So it's like that first step is like understanding what is the regulatory framework that we have to follow, but also how can it be evolving. Also, when Nicolas was explaining about the procurement, some years ago, the public administration, when they were like doing the procedure of the procurement and seeing what was who was going to who was were giving the service, the economic aspect was really important. But now the economic aspect is not the first step that you have to see. There are the green aspects and social aspects. So you can give the service to one company that maybe the economic aspect is higher, but they are giving green. I mean, there are other social and sustainable aspect that makes the decision going in that way, and that's something that has changed in the last years in the EU at the EU level. So it's like really important to understand the regulatory all these layers, but also like what can be better and how it can be changed. And that's like really important for policymakers, and also there are some important things that it's in each local authority or in each level of the license that they have to give license, there are interpretation of the law, and it can be done in a positive way or more in a restrictive way. So that's also like important to understand that when we are talking about people, about social and affordable housing and about renovation, it's important to make that positive or more, like more favorable interpretation of the law. So I think that's like barriers that maybe they are not like brightened directly, but they are involved in all that process. And I think like good practices from different regions and from other countries are really important to really give us some lights and try to change to put it in our local frameworks. I think after Albert will explain us, and also I think the good practices handbook that it's also in ShapeU is like a really good tool for understand that. And also there are many many examples that the local authorities had to change their laws to achieve their objectives.
Thank you, Paula. Well, to finish, I would like to ask the same question to Nerea for the technical and technological innovation.
Yes, hello everybody. So I completely agree with what Paula has just said. So from the technical perspective, we have many different innovative technologies, different solutions, but sometimes they cannot be implemented just right now, because unfortunately, we see that usually the research and innovations go way faster than the regulation, which many times due to, for example, all the bureaucratic issues, it is required a much longer and a much slower process to adapt the current regulations and to update them to the achievements in technology. So we can see now, for example, what is happening with artificial intelligence, for example, or what happened not long time ago with drones and so on. So I think that this is the main regulatory barrier regarding all the technical aspect. But I think that as an answer, this project, the European Affordable Housing Consortium, has a very interesting vision because it promotes an integrated and holistic approach instead of working in silos.
Hank, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, something that I was also thinking on. We're talking about regulatory barriers, but we should also keep in mind that not all regulations are really a barrier. We also have a lot of facilitating regulations. And there was already for new buildings, I think minimum energy performance standards have really facilitated the fast uptake of very good technologies in new buildings. And we see now a shift also towards existing stock regulations that will also, that should support reaching our goals. The zero emissions 2050 mainly have to be realized in the existing stock. And you see that in the EPBD, there will be the next versions, there will be things more related to the existing stock. For instance, in the Netherlands, we already have now announced that housing associations for social housing cannot rent out buildings anymore with the low energy labels in 2028, I think. So that forces them to change their building stock, or at least the worst part of it, quite quickly. And of course, from the perspective of the people living in those houses, it's very nice because they get better houses and lower energy prices. Yeah, it will have a big impact. And also in the Netherlands now we have regulations that, of course, we are mostly depending on natural gas. We have to change that very quickly. When we change our individual gas boilers in houses in a few years' time, it has to be by hybrid heat pumps. That is a forcing regulation. So there are also really supportive regulations, I think.
Yes, thank you, Hank, for saying that, because it's true that when we talk about regulation, it can be a challenge, but it can also be an opportunity. And I think, Paula, you also mentioned that sometimes like good practices could be example, like to replicate, and that sometimes like when the one city is looking at another one and they're trying to see what is blocking them to change the regulation and to copy what's been done in another maybe lighthouse renovation. Do you have an example of such a regulation that facilitate district level renovation? Also that maybe you put in the blueprint?
We have, I mean, in that regulatory part, in the implementation blueprint, we chose LUCE. That they were trying to do an energy community, but they had to change the law to do it so because they couldn't at the beginning. So it's like one example that they changed the law to make a pilot, and now they are spreading and replicating this model in other districts. So it's maybe one example that we have, but in the good practices there are other ones. Good practice handbook.
Thank you, Paula. Is there anything that comes to mind, Nerea, as well, for like a regulation that would facilitate a renovation that you mentioned in the blueprint?
You mean at district level, for example?
Yes, for example.
Okay. Yes, so in the technical blueprint, we mention something that we think it's still relevant in the context of the emergence of integrated plans to district renovation, and it is the sustainable energy and climate action plans. So they are considered as a guideline for integrated plans that the local governments had to put in place within the framework of the Covenant of Mayors. And this plan outlines how to reduce carbon emissions through better energy consumption and generation. So there is a document which is called How to Develop a Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan, which provides a set of detailed recommendations that I couldn't mention them all now, but they are recommendations for the entire process from elaborating a local energy and climate strategy. So you can find recommendations from the initial political commitment to the project implementation. For example, I have here, just to mention a couple of them, some of the recommendations are, for example, to identify all the buildings and facilities owned, managed, and controlled by the local authority, collect energy data related to those buildings and set up a data management system, or classify the buildings according to their energy consumption, among many others. So we think this is a very interesting document which facilitates in a way the district level renovation.
Thank you, Nerea. I wanted to ask the same question as well to Thibaut and Nicolas. If there's also a good example you have in mind of a regulatory opportunity, let's say.
We've seen some, not in France, but in the Netherlands, where they had the ability to increase rents only if they had a certain standard of performance connected to an EPC contract, meaning that it is possible to transfer money that is usually spent for utilities, energy in particular, towards rent if social housing providers can prove that they are going to make some real improvement in terms of performance and thus in terms of energy bill, and that they can use part of this energy bill to be transferred to the rent. So it's an incentive, but it helps a lot to ensure that the business model of global deep renovation works fine.
Thank you, Thibaut. Right? Nicolas, if you want to add something as well, please feel free to do so.
Maybe just to add on what Henk said just before, I think regulations on banning lower energy classes from the market is developing more and more in Europe. For example, France just had these regulations too, and this kind of regulation will help to tackle what we call a very poorly isolated insulated house.
And the last question, it's about the differences between countries and EU regions. I think Thibaut and Nicolas, you wanted to talk about the French case, the French context. So, but maybe generally speaking, like, could you tell us if there are like big differences between like EU regions when it comes like to regulatory challenges?
We can highlight that in France, it is well known for its, let's say, administrative burden, let's say. So we've got a lot of regulations, including those on energy, on buildings, and those regulations sometimes are useful, just like I said prior to your question about the Netherlands example, are useful to try to make the renovation wave happen, but sometimes it's a bit more complicated. So I would say that one different aspect of the French market is that its regulations are pretty heavy, and it's not really easy to for stakeholders, meaning construction companies as well as social housing associations, to try to innovate. And this is one of the main barriers that we have in France, these regulations. Another one would be the ability and the skills that we have in the value chain, in the construction value chain, that needs to improve quite significantly. We've got only a really small percentage of the construction company working on the retrofit market that are really able to deliver in terms of quality and delay and qualitative and quantitative approach, the pipe that we have to build. And also another challenge that might be specific to France, but it's also something that we see globally across Europe as well, is of course due to inflation and the rise in terms of interest rates. Where social housing organizations nowadays in France are not really able to launch new projects either in new builds or in retrofitting due to those high interest rates. That is their main barrier in terms of financing as well. So this one is not particular to France, but I think we have to mention it because it's going to strongly impact in the coming years the ability for social housing organizations to retrofit their buildings.
Does one of you want to add something to this question? Nicolas, Nerea, Paula, or Hank? No. So we can close the panel discussion here. Thank you for all of the Blueprint authors for answering these questions. And of course, they will be available for your question as well later on after Sven's presentation. But now I give the floor and the screen to Sven so that we can discover the Agbor model.
Thank you. I need to share my screen here. Okay, does it work now? Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yes, thank you for inviting me for this meeting. I'm working here in Aalborg, which is in the northern part of the country, if you know the geography. In the Himmerland Boligforening, or translated Housing Association. We are a non-profit social housing association, and I've been working here since 2009 as a development manager. Just short words about Aalborg, which is an old industrial city which has transformed the recent years to more what you can say that the new industry in Aalborg is education. We have a large university, and maybe that's some of you may know Aalborg University from different projects. So that's the biggest industry we have right now. We have in Aalborg East, that's what I'm talking about. This is one of the suburban areas to Aalborg. It's a large district for social housing. It was built out in the 70s, 5 kilometers out of the city center. It has been challenging ever since, because from the start it was not that popular to live here because it was kind of far out of the city. There was very few services, and the housing quality was also it was technical good, but the environmental value was low. So we have been working in this area with many types of investments over the last 15 years. We have built up a new district center. We have worked both with new private and social housing, renovating social housing, and we have been very much been focused on partnerships involving relevant partners all over the city, not to make this big challenge. It is a big challenge. We had this housing area, the vulnerable housing area with 3,000 units. So it's for us a quite big task to transform this area. So we needed partnerships with all kinds of different partners all over the city, and also to gain knowledge and how to do this. After the total figures, you can see here we have renovated for quite a lot of money the social housing. We have also invested in new build, and we have attracted private partners to do a new build in the area. And there has been built up new shopping facilities, new infrastructure facilities. So after these 15 years, we have achieved to invest for a little over 450 million euro. So in this scale for Aalborg, it's a quite big investment. You can see this is the kind of environment we started up with. This kind of housing built in the 70s. As I told you before, the technical quality was okay, but it was not, as I told you, a popular place to live. So it has been very much in some periods we have vacant apartments, and also there is a concentration of a lot of people with social needs and people out of work and so on, because it has not been the first choice for many families to live here. So that's what we have. That's what have been our biggest challenge. So we had around these 3,000 social housing, and the plan we have worked with has involved about 1,500 units. And you can see the kind of transformation has been done before and after. It's quite deep renovation. We have the whole building envelope have been changed. We have saved the basic concrete structure, but we have changed also the apartments very much to from a very few types of apartment. We have changed it into a diverse, bigger, smaller apartments, to be able to fit the needs better for a future industry, a city with lots of university activities, and so we can now house different types of households much better. And also for energy, we have been improved, so we have reduced the energy consumption in these buildings with about 50%. It's all district heating. So that's how the situation is. Yes, basically the Aalborg model is to make this physical and social master plan involving, of course, mostly the local municipality. All the different departments and sectors have been involved. This has also been an area with lots of crime. So we have also had a close partnership with the police. Of course, the tenants, we have a very strong tenants organization who has been involved in doing these transformations. And we have involved also the different voluntary organizations in the area into for instance, sports or elderly senior organizations and health organizations and so on. And of course, the local business communities have been involved. We didn't have much business community itself in the area, so we have to attract from other parts of the city, to attract investments in the area. We have, from the start, and we realized that we had to look in a broader perspective of how could we improve the area. It was not enough with our own tools. We had to get support from many parts, many organizations. Shortly about what is the framework we work in it. We are, as I told you, a social housing association, non-profit. In Danish context, around 20% of all housing in Denmark is this kind of housing, and it's on 3 pillars here. You can see 3 pillars here. It is a non-profit, and that means that the rents are equal operating and maintenance and capital cost, and all decisions about renovation have to be decided by tenants democracy. So we have referendums for each project in each part of the city, and also to involve the tenant board in these decisions. So that has been very important for the whole process. About the financial model, we are supported somehow by the state. When we do new build or renovation, we are building on a national building fund who works this way that if you see the first years in a lifetime of a building, of course the tenants, we have a mortgage, and of course the tenants pay by rent most of the mortgage, but then we also have a public housing subsidy, and after the mortgage has been paid or the loan has been paid out after 30 years, then a period they repay, the support from the state is paid back, and when that is paid back, all the rent goes to this central disposition fund and a housing construction fund, and also local disposition funds. So after 35 years or something like that, a lot of the rent goes into these big funds, and that's why we can finance all this very deep renovation. The way we do, and these funds can be used to, if there are building damages, it can be used for new construction, also for infrastructure. We can modernize the dwellings, we can improve or establish community facilities, or we can do analyzing job, or we can do social programs also. Yeah. So the conclusion is that this sector here in Denmark is very much publicly regulated through rules and subsidies, even though there's some is coming from the public, a lot of them also coming from the tenants' old funds, but still very much publicly regulated. So the question for us, how could we establish partnerships with other sectors in private enterprise, private players, without overstepping boundaries in relation to unfair competition? That has been one of the questions that's been following us all the way, and if you go a little back to the story, we didn't have these legislations. If you go back in history, for instance, in the 70s, housing associations could invest, for instance, in shopping centers. And the result of that policy at that time was that a lot of housing associations were hit with bankruptcies because they invested a huge amount in these shopping centers. So that's the background that the law was changed. It was not possible for housing associations to invest in these kind of shopping centers. But later on in the later years, they have realized that you have to do something about this boundary, and so now it's become legally for housing associations to form a side activity company. That means that we can establish an independent company with the ownership of the housing association, but separated from the rest of the organizations. And we can do it on certain conditions. If we want to, like here, develop a socially disadvantaged housing area, or another condition is that we can't take unnecessary financial risk, and we must not, if we do property for rent, we should do it on a market basis. And that means also, so we have formed this, we call it Himmerland Erhverv. That's our side activity company. It can be translated to Himmerland Business in English. And unlike our core business, as we are a non-profit organization with relations to public sector, we don't pay tax, we don't pay VAT, but our side activity is just like in private business, is a tax-paying organization. So that's the way we can do it. And we have a part of the development that we have. We can see here we have renovated blocks, and we have sold ground for private developers to do these more high-rise buildings, so we can get a mixed community with social and private housing. That's one of the initiatives we have been doing, but this has been allowed to the core business, and we also have developed other new build. The housing you see here, some of it is private and some of it is social. You can't really see the difference. It's very much integrated. One of the first projects we did, you can see here's before renovations part of the area. 3 blocks was demolished to build a health center, and we did that. The private housing you saw before was established by private investors. So we sold the ground for privates to develop the housing. In this case, we demolished 3 blocks and built a health center. Based from our side activity company. So that's in the property of the side activity company of Himmerland Erhverv or Himmerland Business has erected and invested in this health center. It's a combination with neighborhood facilities and health. So part of it is commercial. That means that we let out rooms for clinics, all kinds of doctor, both private and public clinics for health, and we also have facilities, community facilities for the area. So it's a combination So this, and for instance, also we have a non-profit cafe inside the center, because that's also another way we can do it. If that's a non-commercial. So part of the house is also non-commercial, and we have this non-profit cafe who employs young people from the area, and the cafe produces food for the clinic owners, and so it has a double function to do job training and also to serve the users of the health center. Another project we have made as part of the renovation, we have done a so-called commercial housing for startups. That means we have added, as you see in this picture up here, we have added an extension to the apartment, so you can live in the area, and then you have your business, have a small business facility beside your housing. Some of this is here, like is also occupied by small business into. This is for feed. What do you call it? Therapist. But we also have an art gallery, and we have a hairdresser, and all kinds of small different startups in the area. And this has also been erected by this side activity company. We can do that, so the rent is also means that we pay tax of the surplus of this in this investment. We have done it here. You can see the business facilities as an extension built here. But this is also renovated block, and this block we have added a new build story on this one. This is from the inside of this startup. You can see you have the normal apartment in behind, and then you can go to your business facility where you can receive customers and do your business close to your home. And here you see also you have a hairdresser here, and we have also here a business who takes care of and has to do business networking or recruiting business over here. So we can see all these kind of different initiatives and investment have made a big change. So we have a much more diverse population now. That means that the average income has raised 19%. We also can see that the court decisions crime has decreased by 53%, and so on, and employment had increased. So a lot of positive results have been achieved to this very ambitious and long-term, and it could be only by doing at the conclusion you can say that if, as here, we are able to invest in social housing, we can also attract private investments, and the private investments is for us also as secures our own investments in social housing. So it's very essential that the legal tools are in place to do this kind of partnerships. So that's I think the main learning from our project. So thank you for giving me the floor to do this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sven, for this inspiring example.
It was 20 minutes. 20 minutes exactly. I see.
Yes, you did. I mean, perfect timing. And now I will stop the recording.
Yeah, and I will stop sharing here, yes.
I will open the floor for questions.